Hey mushroom nerds, it's Anna McHugh looking at some beautiful Lactarius indigo species group mushrooms. These are common in the summertime and the fall and grow with pine. I've covered these before. They're highly recognizable, so if you're new to mushroom foraging, this may be redundant information for you. But these are just some of the most beautiful and recognizable mushrooms that I think anybody can appreciate, even if they are just getting out into the woods for the very, very first time to observe these marvelous organisms. So their identification features are quite easy, and they are edible. I will add that I don't prefer to eat the species that we find in my area of North Carolina. They tend to be a little bit mealy. Now, there are some folks that really like them, and there are also some species of this, especially in, I believe, Mexico and the Southwest, that are more substantial as far as their flesh, and so more popular from an edibility perspective. But really, it's all, like, mushroom edibility is highly subjective. I use what I call the hot pocket scale. So if a mushroom is more satisfying than a hot pocket, specifically a pepperoni pizza hot pocket, then I am going to consider it for foraging and bringing home with me. If it is less satisfying than a hot pocket on a consistent basis, then I consider it to be a mushroom that is edible but not in my tasty category. So nonetheless, these Lactarius indigo species group mushrooms, or indigo milkies commonly, that's the common name, are just so gorgeous and recognizable. So this is a pretty mature specimen, and so you can see sort of the color of the gills is a very, very sort of dark and beautiful blue, and almost as soon as I touch it, you can see the blue. It's called latex. So milky caps in general, so the Lactarius genus, have 1 degree or another of this latex or fluid that comes out of the fruiting body, or very frequently out of the gills. Sometimes it's really sort of watery, or the colors can vary radically, and also the abundance of the latex or the juice can be very radical. But in the case of Lactarius indigo species group, the second you damage the gills and also the fruiting body, you just get this really, really colorful latex. And it's also pretty persistent. Like, I'm gonna have a lot of this on my knife for a while to come. I always say it's sort of like, it looks like I had a serious altercation with a Smurf every time I harvest these mushrooms. So I just showed you one of the more mature ones because I want to also spend some time highlighting my absolute favorite features with a younger one that I haven't damaged so much. Okay, so we've looked at the undersurface. That is really recognizable, as is that bleeding reaction. But this concentric sort of silvery, dark blue, gray color is just gorgeous. And you can see you have sort of narrow concentric growth zones that widen out. And the caps of these mushrooms are often sort of this medium blue, but with sort of a light color. There are other species that are more specifically silvery blue, one that is called Lactarius prodigious, and it can be like blue and purple, and it has mulberry juice, like mulberry colored juice. So it's gorgeous, and you know, this isn't the only edible blue, gray, or you know, blue mushroom that has some of these concentric growth zones. I want to highlight that specifically because that is a feature you'll see commonly with all kinds of Lactarius mushrooms. And, you know, sometimes it's very pronounced in the case of Lactarius indigo and a lot of its relatives, but sometimes it's far more subtle and sometimes absent. So this is a really good example of that sort of, I don't know, it's almost, it looks like a mineral formation to me in many respects. And as the mushrooms mature, you can see they get sort of a big divot, and they're not very consistently shaped. They can tend to be a little bit sort of vase-like and waffly. And I'll show you the brittleness I was talking about that doesn't make this a mushroom that I enjoy eating very much. So at the base of the stem, you can also see you have the latex coming through. That is not super common with a lot of these Lactarius mushrooms. Like a lot of times, it's just a little bit of action on the gills, and sometimes you have to wait a while to even see anything happen. But, you know, I just damaged this, and there's a lot of, you know, the blue juice. But also at the base of this fairly mature specimen, you can just see it like pop right up, and it's immediate and abundant. But you can also see it's totally hollow in the middle, and as I open it up, it's kind of breaky and brittle. Now this one's fairly nice in consistency, but you know, nonetheless, I typically put these, you know, maybe about 15 to 20% less satisfying than a Hot Pocket that has been perfectly prepared and perhaps even toasted a little bit. I digress. So you know, I'm going to leave these here, but a lot of folks, especially given the condition of these younger ones, may, you know, really get a kick out of them. But oftentimes they fall apart and are mealy, especially like these older specimens. But I'm going to highlight one more feature on this little one, which is called scrobiculation, or little pits that appear on the stem. And this is not a ubiquitous or like consistent feature with all of these Lactarius indigo mushrooms. And in this case, it's really kind of, they're very, very small, like look like little craters. But with the bigger and older ones, those scrobiculi can really open up and turn into these sort of darker colored pits, and that's actually sort of a slimy, I think it's like bacteria and a little bit of the colored goo from the fruiting body that reside inside of these pits. And I have looked at them under a hand lens. They're kind of cool because they're a little bit sort of greasy, slimy. One other thing I'm going to highlight here with the mature one is you often have a little bit of like cobweb, literal cobwebs that will stick to mushrooms. So be aware of that in general, but also with a lot of the Lactarius mushrooms, including Lactarius indigo, you have sort of a greenish discoloration that happens as the mushroom matures and sporulates. And you can see also the growth zones as it opens up is consistent. But as you look at the edge here, it's not just the blue bleeding, but also this green thing happening with it. And I'll highlight that on this other large, beautiful sort of, this is the ultimate maturity level of this mushroom species group. But I just love to find them. I'm going to conclude with something that I find to be just sort of a tradition. So this is a Red Russula mushroom. And in the spirit of taking it easy with being too precise with mushroom identification, like in the case of this beautiful edible mushroom, we can only call it species group, especially if, you know, you're in the field and you're not using microscopy and you're not using genetic analysis. In the same way, this Red Russula mushroom, it would be a fool's errand to try to identify it specifically to species. That said, Russulas are like absolutely ubiquitous. They're this sort of red color often. You have purple ones, you have green ones that are really beautiful, but they have a lot of similarities in sort of like cap stem, no particular ornamentation, like no big old ring on the stem or anything like that. Like these can look quite similar to a lot of your Lactarius mushrooms, but instead they don't have any sort of, you know, any latex whatsoever. And Russulas are called brittle gills for what may appear to be an obvious reason. So they have white gills and they just fall apart or explode. And if you look in mushroom field guides, they'll often say they break like a piece of chalk, which is true if the mushroom, if your Russula is fresh and has not been eaten by bugs. So you can see a lot of maggot damage in here, and it is a little snappy, but kind of a smush snap. And so I always say if you have a mushroom that's sort of like red or purple and very explodey underneath, but you know, with the caveat that there are a lot of different colors, you have a Russula on your hands. Now, there are hundreds of species of the Russula genus. Many of them are unnamed, but they are really gorgeous and remarkable for smashing. Also, some of them are mild and, you know, people like to eat them. Given how frail a lot of them are, you know, I tend not to do that, but some people like to pickle Russula mushrooms. And caveat here, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them has sort of like really peppery, acrid flavor, like this one. I'm a little surprised. So, a lot of your Russula mushrooms have a very sort of cayenne pepper, peppery flavor. Now, it's not capsaicin, the specific chemical that is within, you know, your hot peppers. It is something totally different, but it is the same sort of peppery spice, especially like right on the tip of your tongue. And you notice I just took a little, you know, sample of it and then chewed it and spit it out. So like if you're going to taste test mushrooms, it's usually not necessary if you want to identify them. But with Russulas, you know, a lot of them are sort of mild and have no taste. And a lot of them do have this sort of peppery thing going on. This one is not super sharp, but it did hit me immediately. And some of these, you'll chew on them and you're like, oh, nothing's going on. And then all of a sudden it'll hit you like a ton of bricks. There are also some really wonderful relatives of these Lactarius indigo mushrooms that are very, very peppery. So the Lactarius pipperatus, or the peppery milky caps, there's a number of them. They're like white fruiting bodies all over, and they have really tightly packed gills in a lot of cases, and they are just razor sharp, so spicy. So that's something you can observe in both of these genera. And to that point also, you know, that brittleness I was talking about with these mushrooms is reminiscent to the brittleness, but not quite the extent of smashiness of the Russula mushrooms in general. But I'm gonna see what I can do as far as a smash for you. I don't know how well that showed up. And I will conclude with this beautiful little Caesar mushroom. So I think this may be Amanita jacksonii. There are a number of Caesar mushrooms, but I just want to highlight the beauty of the colors of some of our fall mushroom species. So like this is toward the end of the mushroom season in the Southeastern U.S. And so it kind of, like, for me, it feels like final season a little bit. But you have a lot of mushrooms that mature when it is kind of cool weather. And I think that also allows a lot of these beautiful colors to come in before the bugs really settle in. So this is just a gorgeous little edible mushroom I wanted to show you. Because a lot of times, like in the fall, just taking pictures of the different sort of hues of the forest really is one of my favorite parts of the fall. So anyway, I really hope you're well. If you are affected by Hurricane Helene, I hope you're well. If you're not, please do contribute and try to support folks who are affected. As you know, North Carolina is a very special place. Tennessee, the Appalachians are just a gorgeous, wonderful place culturally. The habitats there are one of a kind. So do what you can to support emotionally, you know, in-kind donations, volunteer activities, financially, the recovery efforts, because it's going to take a long time for us to recover and come together for these communities to be functional and whole again. So take care, find a billion mushrooms, support each other, and we'll talk again soon.